The massive alien ship hung in space like a silver moon. Inside its main chamber, 17 different species sat in a circle, watching the humans with eyes that gleamed with confidence. They had made their decision, and they were certain it would expose Earth's greatest weakness. Commander Daejung stood before the Galactic Council, his hands clasped behind his back. His face showed no emotion, but inside, alarm bells were ringing. He had fought in 3 wars. He knew a trap when he saw one. The trials of ascendancy, the mantis-like creature named Veshtara announced, her voice clicking through the translator, will prove whether humanity deserves to expand further into the galaxy. Each species sends their finest representatives to compete in trials of survival, combat, and wisdom. Daejung nodded slowly. That part made sense. Every species would send their champions, their best warriors and thinkers. Earth had plenty of those. Then Veshtara's mandibles curved into what might have been a smile. However, we require that humanity send a representative sample of your population, not just your enhanced soldiers or genius scientists. You must include those of limited capability. The chamber fell silent. Daejung understood immediately. The other species would send their absolute best. Humanity would be forced to send people the Council considered weak, people who were old, disabled, or untrained. It was designed to be an impossible challenge. We've studied your species, the 4-armed breviks named Mach, then added, his voice deep and measured. You keep members who cannot contribute efficiently. You protect the elderly, the injured, the young. This is your flaw. These trials will expose it. Daejung wanted to refuse. Every military instinct screamed at him to walk away from this rigged game, but he knew the Council would see refusal as admission of weakness. Earth's expansion into the stars would stop. Millions of colonists on distant worlds would be cut off, isolated. We accept, he said quietly. Back on Earth, Ambassador Hae-won received her orders. She was to select 5 humans to represent their entire species. The weight of it pressed down on her shoulders as she sat in her office, reviewing files. She could pick Earth's super soldiers, genetically enhanced and trained from birth. She could choose Olympic athletes or brilliant scientists with modified neural implants. Earth had plenty of champions who could compete with any species in the galaxy. But Hae-won understood something about the Council that Commander Daejung had sensed. They weren't just testing humanity's champions. They were testing whether humans would abandon their values when survival was at stake. They expected Earth to send only the strong, proving that human compassion was just words. Or worse, they expected Earth to send the weak and watch them fail miserably. Hae-won made a different choice. She would send people the Council thought were weak, but she would show them something they didn't understand. She found Taemin working in a factory on Luna Station. He was 19 years old and had lost both legs in a mining accident 2 years earlier. His prosthetic legs were industrial grade, built for function rather than appearance. When Hae-won explained why she had come, Taemin stared at her for a long moment. You want me to represent humanity against alien champions because I have artificial legs? He asked. I want you to represent humanity because you got back up after you fell, Hae-won replied. Because you didn't let that accident define your limits. Taemin looked down at his metal legs. When do we leave? Bo-ra was 67 years old and lived in a small apartment in Seoul. She had been a teacher for 40 years before retiring. Her hands were twisted with arthritis, and she moved slowly, carefully. When Hae-won appeared at her door, Bo-ra made tea and listened quietly. They think I'm weak because I'm old, Bo-ra said finally. It wasn't a question. They think age is weakness, Hae-won confirmed. They don't understand that experience is strength, Bo-ra smiled. The kind of smile that held decades of managing unruly classrooms and impossible situations. Then, let's teach them something. Young-soo was 23 and worked as a data analyst in Tokyo. He was brilliant with numbers and patterns. But he suffered from severe anxiety. Some days, Leaving his apartment felt like climbing a mountain. When HFY found him, he was certain she had made a mistake. "I can't," he said, his hands shaking. "I can barely handle normal life. How can I compete against aliens?" "Your mind sees patterns others miss," HFY told him. "And you face fear every single day, and still keep going. That's not weakness, that's courage." Young Soo didn't believe her. But he said yes anyway. Ji-woo was 16 and small for her age. She lived on Mars, in the agricultural domes, where she helped grow food for the colony. She had asthma, which meant she always had to be careful with her breathing in the thin Martian atmosphere. She was finishing her homework when HFY's message arrived. "My parents won't let me go," Ji-woo said over the video call. "They'll say I'm too young, too small." "Are you?" HFY asked simply. Ji-woo thought about the times she had worked 16-hour days to save crops during a dome breach. She thought about the older workers who relied on her quick thinking. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not." Hyun-woo was 52 years old and worked in waste management on Luna Station. He was overweight and exhausted most days. He was also a single father, raising a 14-year-old daughter. When HFY approached him, he laughed. "You've got the wrong person," he said. "I'm nobody special. I just haul garbage in space." "You keep a space station running," HFY corrected. "You do work that needs doing, without complaint, every single day. And you raised a daughter alone while doing it. That's special." Hyun-woo looked at his daughter, who was watching with wide eyes. "I think you should go show them what my dad can do," she said. 3 weeks later, the 5 humans stood on the transport ship heading to the Council's testing grounds. Around them, the champions of other species prepared for the trials. There was Krell, a 9-foot-tall Drexian warrior whose muscles rippled under armored skin. There was Siva, a Quillan scout whose exoskeleton gleamed and whose multiple eyes could see in spectrums humans couldn't imagine. There were twins from Helvex, telepathically linked hunters who had never failed to catch their prey. The champions looked at the human team and smiled. They saw an old woman, a young girl, an overweight middle-aged man, a boy with anxiety, and someone with prosthetic legs. They saw weakness. Krell approached the humans, towering over them. "These are Earth's champions?" he asked, his voice amused. "We will try not to hurt you too badly in the trials." Taemin looked up at the massive warrior. "Thanks for your concern." Bo-Ra patted Krell's arm the way she used to pat nervous students. "That's very sweet of you, dear." The Drexian warrior looked confused, uncertain if he was being mocked. He walked away, shaking his head. On the observation deck, the council members watched the competitors through screens. Veshtara's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. "The humans have sent us exactly what we expected. This will be over quickly." But Mach then, the Brevik's arbiter, said nothing. He simply watched the 5 humans, noting how they stayed close to each other, how they spoke quietly among themselves. There was something in their body language that didn't match their apparent physical limitations. Commander Daejung and Ambassador HFY watched from a separate chamber. "You took a huge risk," Daejung said quietly. "No," HFY replied. "I took the only option that stays true to who we are. The Council wanted to see if we'd abandon our weakest to win. Instead, I'm showing them something they've forgotten." "What's that?" "That we don't have a weakest. We just have humans. And every single one of them carries the same fire inside." The transport ship began its descent to the first trial world. The jungle planet below was notorious for killing unprepared visitors. The Council expected the human team to call for extraction within hours. They had no idea what was coming. The jungle of Korath Prime was designed to kill. Rain fell from the sky like acid tears, burning anything it touched for too long. The trees had thorns that dripped poison. Creatures with too many teeth hunted in packs. The temperature swung from freezing at night to blistering during the day. This was where the Quillan trained their warrior caste, and most trainees didn't survive their first week. The trial was simple. Survive for 7 days, and reach the extraction point 200 kilometers away. The council expected most competitors to make it. They were trained for this. They didn't expect the humans to last 2 days. The 5 humans stood at the starting point, looking at the hostile jungle before them. Around them, other competitors were already moving, confident and fast. Krell, the Drexian warrior, didn't even look back at the humans as he charged forward, his armored skin protecting him from the thorns. "Well," Hyunwoo said, adjusting his pack, "this is going to be interesting." "Stay together," Bo-Ra said firmly. Her voice had the tone that made everyone instinctively listen. 40 years of teaching had given her that. "We move as a group. No one gets left behind." The first day was brutal. The acid rain started an hour after they began walking. The other competitors either had natural armor or moved fast enough to find shelter quickly. The humans had neither advantage. But Young-soo noticed something. His anxious mind, always worried and always watching, saw patterns others missed. "The rain comes from the northeast," he said quickly, "and it always stops near those rock formations. If we angle toward them." They did. They found shelter in a cave system that kept them dry. Later, they heard Siva the Quillen complaining over the communication channel. Her armor had been damaged by the rain. She had tried to push through rather than find shelter. The second day brought the real danger. The jungle's predators were hunting. Most competitors could handle 1 or 2 attacks. But these creatures hunted in coordinated packs. They were smart, fast, and hungry. Taemin's prosthetic legs, built for industrial work in low gravity, moved differently than organic legs. On the uneven jungle floor, they gave him advantages. He could lock them in place for stability. He could adjust their length for climbing. When a predator lunged at Jiwoo, Taemin moved faster than anyone expected, putting himself between the girl and the creature. His metal legs struck the predator hard enough to send it flying. "Thank you," Jiwoo gasped. "We protect each other," Taemin said simply. "That's how humans work." The council observers watched with growing confusion. The human with prosthetic legs was outperforming competitors with enhanced organic limbs. It made no sense according to their models. The third day brought a massive storm. The wind howled through the jungle like a living thing. Trees fell. The temperature dropped to freezing. Every competitor scrambled to find shelter and warmth. The elite competitors, trained for individual glory, each sought their own shelter. Krell found a deep cave. Siva climbed into the canopy. The Helvexian twins used their telepathic link to coordinate, but they still operated as a unit of 2. The humans huddled together and built something. Hyunwoo, who had spent 20 years maintaining life support systems, understood survival engineering. He directed the team in creating a shelter from fallen trees and broad leaves. It was crude and ugly, but it worked. The 5 humans stayed warm and dry by sharing body heat and working together. When the storm ended, the communication channels lit up with emergency signals. Krell's cave had flooded. He barely survived. The Helvexian twins had nearly died from exposure. 3 other competitors had called for emergency extraction. The humans emerged from their shelter, tired but alive, all 5 of them. "How?" Veshtara demanded in the council chamber. "The humans have no natural advantages. They should be struggling more than the others." Mok then leaned forward, watching the screens carefully. "Perhaps they have advantages we don't measure." On the 4th day, Young-soo made his most important discovery. His anxious mind had been mapping the terrain obsessively, looking for threats everywhere. That constant worry made him notice what others missed. "There's a cave system," he said excitedly. "See how the water flows here? There's an underground river. If we follow it, we can cut 50 kilometers from the journey." "That's dangerous," Bo-Ra said. But she was looking at him with approval. "Caves can collapse, flood, or trap us." "Yes," Young-soo admitted. His hands were shaking. "But I think it's our best option." They took the risk. Jiwoo's small size meant she could scout ahead through narrow passages. Her asthma had taught her to be conscious of every breath, to manage her oxygen carefully. In the thin cave air, that discipline kept her from panicking when others would have. The underground route worked. They emerged 2 days ahead of where they should have been. The council observers scrambled to understand how the humans had moved so fast. The 6th day brought the razorwings. These creatures were the planet's apex predators. They hunted in swarms, their blade-like wings capable of cutting through armor. They had killed council observers before. Protocol stated that if razorwings attacked, competitors should scatter and hide. The razorwings found the humans in an open area with nowhere to hide. There were at least 30 of the creatures, circling overhead, preparing to dive. "Run!" someone shouted over the communication channel. "Find cover." But the humans didn't run. They couldn't. Bo-Ra's arthritis meant she couldn't sprint. Hyun-Woo was exhausted and slow. If they scattered, the weakest would die. So they did something the council had never seen before. They stood together and fought as one unit. Tae-min planted his prosthetic legs, becoming an unmovable shield. His industrial strength limbs struck with devastating force. Young-Soo, despite his fear screaming at him to flee, called out positions and patterns, directing their defense. Ji-Woo used her small size to dart between attacks, distracting the creatures. Hyun-Woo protected Bo-Ra, taking hits meant for her. And Bo-Ra, the 67-year-old grandmother, coordinated everything with the calm voice of someone who had managed chaos for 4 decades. Ji-Woo, left side. Tae-min, hold center. Young-Soo, next pattern. They fought for 20 minutes. When it was over, half the razorwing swarm was dead or driven off. The humans were injured and bleeding, but they were alive. All 5 of them. The council chamber erupted in argument. "This is impossible," Veshtara insisted. "Individual competitors cannot defeat a razorwing swarm. They didn't fight as individuals." Mok then said quietly, "They fought as something else. Something we don't have a word for." Mach then 7. On the 7th day, the humans reached the extraction point. They were the 3rd team to arrive, despite the council's expectation that they would be last or dead. More importantly, they had brought 3 injured competitors from other species with them. Competitors who would have died if the humans hadn't stopped to help them. Krell, the Drexian warrior, was one of them. The massive warrior had been trapped under a fallen tree. The humans had found him, and despite being exhausted and injured themselves, they had worked together to free him. Then they had carried him for 10 kilometers. At the extraction point, Krell approached Tae-min. His pride was wounded, his dignity crushed. "You saved me," he said, "even though helping me could have cost you victory." "Why?" Tae-min adjusted his prosthetic leg, which had been damaged in the razorwing fight. "Because we could," he said simply. "You needed help. We could give it. That's reason enough." Krell stared at him. "In Drexian culture, you only helped those who could repay you or who served your interests. The concept of helping someone simply because they needed it was alien to him. Literally, your people saved 3 competitors who could have threatened your victory," Krell continued. "This makes no sense." Bo-Ra patted the giant warrior's arm again. "Maybe that's something your people need to learn, dear." The council was forced to acknowledge the humans' success. They had survived all 7 days. They had reached the extraction point ahead of schedule. They had lost no team members. By every measure, they had passed the trial. But Veshtara was not satisfied. They succeeded through luck and cooperation. The next trial will prove their weakness. Combat cannot be won through sentiment. In the medical bay, the 5 humans received treatment for their injuries. They were exhausted, hurting, and homesick. But they had done something impossible. "Do you think they understand yet?" Ji-Woo asked quietly. Ambassador Hae-won, who had arrived for the next trial phase, smiled. "No. They still think they're testing our weakest. They don't understand that we don't categorize humans that way. Every person carries the same potential for strength. Commander Dae-jung looked at the 5 humans. The old woman, the young girl, the anxious analyst, the man with prosthetic legs, and the exhausted father. By the Council's measure, these were Earth's weakest. By humanity's measure, they were simply people who had been given a challenge, and they had met it. The next trial is combat, Dae-jung told them. It will be harder. Tae-min smiled, a fierce expression that showed he had found something in himself during the survival trial. Something the Council hadn't expected. Good, he said. Let them bring their champions. We'll show them what humans can do. Good. Outside the medical bay, Krell stood with several other alien competitors. They had been discussing the humans, trying to understand what they had witnessed. They should not have survived, Siva said. By all logical analysis, they lacked the capabilities. Perhaps, Krell said slowly, we are analyzing them incorrectly. Perhaps their strength is not in individual capability, but in something else. What? Another competitor asked. Krell thought about the moment the humans had found him trapped and injured. He thought about how they hadn't hesitated, hadn't calculated whether helping him was worth the cost. They had simply helped because that's what they did. I don't know, he admitted, but I want to learn. The arena of proving was a sphere 3 kilometers wide, hanging in the darkness of space. Inside, it could simulate any battlefield from any world in the galaxy. This was where the Council tested a species' warriors, where champions proved their worth through combat. Every competitor was offered neural implants before the trial began. Military-grade technology that enhanced reaction time, tactical processing, and pain suppression. The implants were standard across the Council species. Enhanced warriors were simply better warriors. Every species' representatives accepted the implants. Enhanced reflexes, faster thinking, reduced pain. These were obvious advantages. To refuse them would be foolish. The 5 humans refused them. The Council chamber erupted in confusion. Why would they refuse? Veshtara demanded. The implants provide measurable advantages. This is irrational. Ambassador Hae-won stood before the Council. But it's not what makes a warrior. My people have always fought with what they have, not with what they wish they had. Krell, watching from the competitor's area, felt a stirring of something he didn't recognize. Respect, perhaps. The humans were voluntarily handicapping themselves. By Drexian standards, this should be weakness. Yet after the survival trial, Krell was beginning to question what weakness meant. The first round was individual combat scenarios. Each competitor faced simulated tactical situations alone. The other species' champions approached these with their enhanced abilities, their superior physical attributes, their lifetime of specialized training. Young-soo entered his scenario, an urban warfare simulation. His heart was pounding. His anxiety was a screaming thing in his mind, telling him to run, to hide, to give up. His hands shook as he checked his simulated weapon, but he had learned something during the survival trial. Fear didn't mean inability. His anxious mind saw threats everywhere, yes, but it also saw opportunities, patterns, weaknesses in the enemy's approach. The scenario's AI was programmed to be unpredictable. But to Young-soo's pattern-seeking brain, nothing was truly random. He saw the logic beneath the chaos. Instead of fighting the AI directly, he turned the environment into a weapon, collapsed buildings to block approach routes, used reflective surfaces to create false targets, led the AI into its own crossfire. When the scenario ended, Young-soo was shaking and exhausted. But he had won. More than that, his time was faster than 3 enhanced competitors. The Council observers leaned forward. How did he do that without neural enhancement? He thought differently, Mach then observed. His unenhanced mind found solutions the AI wasn't programmed to expect. Ji-woo's scenario was a hostage rescue. The 16-year-old girl stared at the simulated hostages, children among them, and felt her jaw tighten. On Mars, any mistake meant death for everyone. You didn't take risks with lives. You treated every person as essential. The scenario expected her to use speed and force. Instead, she used her small size to access maintenance tunnels. She used patience to wait for the perfect moment. She used precision instead of aggression. When she moved, it was with the absolute focus of someone who knew that failure meant innocent people died. She extracted all hostages without a single casualty. Her score was the highest in the round. Taemin's scenario was deliberately cruel. Close quarters combat in a confined space, designed to show that prosthetic legs were a disadvantage in tight areas. The council expected him to struggle. They were wrong. Taemin had lost his legs 2 years ago. In that time, he had dealt with pain, with loss, with people who looked at him like he was broken. He had conquered fears that the council's warriors had never faced. When you've already lost parts of yourself and learned to keep going, physical danger becomes less frightening. His prosthetic legs, designed for industrial work, delivered devastating strikes. They locked in position, giving him stability organic legs couldn't match. They absorbed impacts that would have shattered bone. And behind the metal, behind the scars, was a human who had decided long ago that his accident didn't define his limits. The scenario ended with Taemin standing over defeated opponents, his prosthetics sparking but functional. The council chamber was silent. Bo-Ra's scenario tested tactical command. She had to coordinate simulated troops in a defensive battle against overwhelming odds. The other commanders used aggressive tactics, trying to match their opponent's strength. Bo-Ra did something different. She treated the simulated troops like students. Each one had different strengths, different weaknesses, different potential. She understood that patience often defeated aggression. That waiting for the enemy to make a mistake was sometimes better than forcing a confrontation. She held her position, absorbed the enemy's attacks, and waited. When the enemy overextended, she struck with precision. Her victory was methodical, efficient, and carried the lowest casualty rate in the round's history. The council military advisors were stunned. She used no advanced tactics, one complained. No complicated maneuvers. Just basic, defensive principles. Yes, Mok then said, and she achieved the best result. Perhaps advanced is not always better. Hyunwoo's scenario was endurance combat. Wave after wave of enemies, testing how long a warrior could maintain effectiveness. The enhanced competitors lasted longer than unenhanced beings should be able to. Neural implants suppressed pain and fatigue. Hyunwoo had no such advantages. He was overweight, middle-aged, and tired before the scenario even began. But he had spent 20 years doing a job most people considered beneath them. Getting up every day, doing hard work, never complaining, always reliable. He understood something the warriors didn't. Glory was temporary. Showing up every day was eternal. He didn't fight with grace or style. He fought with stubborn determination. When his body screamed at him to stop, he kept going. When his muscles burned, he kept going. When the pain became unbearable, he thought about his daughter watching these trials, and he kept going. He outlasted competitors half his age and twice his fitness level. When the scenario finally ended, he collapsed, but he had won. The second round was team combat. The 5 humans faced coordinated AI forces designed to exploit individual weaknesses. The council expected this to expose humanity's limits. How could untrained, unenhanced, physically limited humans work together effectively? They found out. Young-Su's anxiety made him hypersensitive to danger. He became their early warning system, calling out threats before anyone else saw them. Jiwoo's small size made her their infiltrator, slipping through defenses. Taemin's strength anchored their defensive positions. Bo-Ra coordinated with the calm certainty of someone who had managed chaos for 40 years. Hyunwoo did the unglamorous work, covering retreats, maintaining their equipment, ensuring everyone else could shine. They moved like water, flowing around obstacles, adapting to every challenge. When one person was threatened, the others responded instantly. When someone made a mistake, the team compensated. They weren't 5 individuals. They were something more. The council observers watched in fascination. They communicate constantly, one noted. Every member knows what the others are doing at all times. It's inefficient, Veshtara insisted. All that coordination takes time and energy. Yet they're winning. Mach then pointed out. The final round was cross-species combat. The humans had to face another species team. The random selection gave them the Drexian champions. Krell and 4 other warriors, all genetically perfected, all trained from birth for combat. It should have been a massacre. The Drexians were stronger, faster, better trained. Their genetic enhancement made them nearly perfect warriors. The fight began. The Drexians attacked with overwhelming force, each warrior a devastating weapon. But they fought for individual glory. When one Drexian gained an advantage, they pressed it for personal achievement. They were 5 perfect warriors fighting near each other. The humans fought differently. When Young-Su identified a weak point, Taemin exploited it instantly. When Ji-woo took a hit protecting Bo-Ra, the sacrifice opened an opportunity that Hyun-woo used immediately. They weren't fighting for personal glory. They were fighting for each other. Krell realized the problem halfway through the match. His team was stronger individually, but the humans fought as a single organism. Every move one human made, the others supported. There were no gaps, no moments of individual vulnerability. The match went longer than anyone expected. The Drexians should have won in minutes. Instead, they fought for an hour. When the time limit ended, the scenario declared a draw. A draw. 5 weak humans had fought the Council's finest warriors to a standstill. The arena fell silent. This had never happened before. The Drexians were considered unbeatable in team combat. Yet these humans, these allegedly limited humans, had matched them. After the match, Krell approached the human team. His armor was dented, his pride wounded, but his eyes held something new. Understanding. Perhaps we were perfect, he said to Taemin. Genetically enhanced, trained from birth, equipped with the finest technology. How did you match us? Taemin was breathing hard, his prosthetics damaged but still functional. You were perfect, he agreed. We were just human. Turns out that's enough. Bo-Ra, sitting nearby with ice on her arthritic hands, added gently. You fought as 5 warriors. We fought as one family. That made the difference. Krell looked at his own team. They were perfect warriors, but they barely knew each other. They had been raised in isolation, trained to be the best individually. The concept of fighting for each other rather than for glory was foreign to them. How do we learn this? Krell asked quietly. I don't know if you can, Ji-woo said. She was exhausted, her asthma making every breath difficult, but her voice was firm. It's not a technique. It's about caring more about your team's success than your own glory. The council held an emergency session. They were supposed to be testing humanity's weakness. Instead, they kept discovering strengths they couldn't explain or measure. The humans refuse enhancement, but match enhanced competitors. One council member said. They should not be able to do this. 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 Yet they do, Mach then replied. Perhaps we need to question our assumptions about what makes a warrior effective. Veshtara was furious. They've succeeded twice through luck and sentiment. The final trial will prove that emotion is weakness. We will test their psychological resilience. We will force them to choose between efficiency and sentiment. Then we will see the truth. Ambassador Hae-won received a warning from Commander Dae-jung. The Council is preparing a final trial. Intel suggests they're targeting what they see as humanity's core weakness, our tendency to let emotion guide our decisions. Hay-1 looked at the 5 exhausted humans. They had survived impossible wilderness. They had fought champions to a draw, and they had done it without abandoning the values that made them human. Let them test emotion, she said quietly. Let them see what happens when you underestimate the strength of caring. The humans rested that night, knowing the hardest trial was still ahead. But they also knew something the council didn't understand. They weren't succeeding despite their supposed weaknesses. They were succeeding because those weaknesses weren't weaknesses at all. The empathy chambers were different from the other testing facilities. There were no jungles, no combat arenas, just small rooms with neural connection chairs. The real test happened inside the mind. Dr. Vinthar, a Breivik psychologist, explained the trial to the assembled council. We have observed that humans become emotional under stress. They form attachments. They grieve. They sacrifice efficiency for sentiment. Every council species has evolved beyond this weakness through genetic modification or cultural conditioning. He gestured to screens showing brain scans. The empathy chambers will force each human to choose between logical victory and emotional response. When faced with this choice, rational beings choose survival. Humans will either do the same, proving they are like us, or they will choose emotion and fail, proving they are inferior. Veshtara's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. Finally, we will expose the truth. Sentiment is not strength. It is evolutionary weakness. Young Overseer Keth, Aquilin, who had been watching the trials closely, spoke up hesitantly. What if they choose neither option? What if they find a third way? There is no third way, Dr. Vinthar said confidently. We have tested this system on 17 species. The scenarios are mathematically perfect. There are only 2 choices. The humans entered the empathy chambers one by one. They knew this was the final trial. Pass this, and they would prove humanity's worth. Fail, and Earth's expansion would be limited forever. Young Su went first. They placed the neural connector on his head and activated the simulation. He found himself commanding a colony ship with failing life support. 900 people were safe in the main sections. 100 people, including 30 children, were in 3 damaged decks. The scenario's logic was clear. Vent the damaged decks. Save the 900. It was mathematics. It was rational. Every council species had made similar choices throughout their histories. Young Su's anxiety exploded. His mind raced through every option, every possibility. The weight of those 100 lives crushed down on him. The scenario expected him to make the logical choice or freeze in panic. He did neither. He started working. His anxious brain, which saw problems everywhere, started seeing solutions. He rerouted power. He calculated alternative venting patterns. He pushed the ship's systems beyond their design specifications. The council observers told him he was wasting time, that the logical choice was obvious. With 2 minutes remaining before total system failure, Young Su found it. A solution that saved everyone. It used more resources. It risked the ship itself. It violated standard protocols, but it worked. When the simulation ended, Young Su was shaking and crying. But everyone had survived. Dr. Vinthar reviewed the results in confusion. The scenario was designed to be unsolvable. There should be no way to save everyone. You designed a scenario where emotional choice led to failure. Mok then observed. He refused to accept that premise. Jiwoo's trial was next. The scenario placed her in a war simulation, where victory required sending child soldiers into certain death. Several council species had used such tactics in their histories and considered it pragmatic wartime necessity. The 16-year-old girl looked at the simulated children on her screens. They were waiting for her orders. The mission required their sacrifice. The scenario expected her to either give the order or refuse and accept military defeat. Jiwoo stared at the simulation for a long moment. Then she spoke directly to Dr. Vinthar. breaking the fourth wall of the scenario. "You're testing whether we'll become like you," she said quietly. "Whether we'll make the terrible choices you've made and call them necessary." The answer is no. She refused to give the order. She accepted the tactical defeat. When Dr. Vinthar insisted she had to choose, Ji Woo's response was firm. "No civilization worth saving is built on children's graves. If your test requires I sacrifice children to prove I'm worthy, then I don't want to pass your test." The council chamber erupted in argument. She had failed the scenario. But somehow, her failure felt more powerful than success would have been. Tamin's scenario was personal. He was commanding a station under attack with limited evacuation resources. The simulation suggested prioritizing essential personnel, with clear implications that those with disabilities, including people like himself, should be lower priority. It was framed as logical resource management. Several council species had such protocols. It was considered efficient. Tamin's response was immediate and fierce. "I've been told I was less valuable my entire life," he said to the simulation. "After the accident, people looked at me like I was broken, like I was a burden. But you know what? The only thing that was ever broken was the idea that human worth comes with conditions." He evacuated based on proximity to escape routes, not perceived value. Some of the first evacuees were elderly, disabled, and young. His efficiency was lower by the simulation's calculations, but everyone who could be saved was saved. "You evaluated humans as resources," Tamin said to the watching council. "We don't do that. Every person matters. Or no one does." Bo-Ra's trial presented her with a classic moral dilemma. Save her own child, or save 5 strangers. Every rational species chose the 5. It was mathematics. 5 lives outweighed 1. Bo-Ra looked at the scenario. At the simulated child who bore her daughter's face from decades past. She had been a teacher for 40 years. She had loved hundreds of students, had fought for them, had protected them. But she had also raised her own child, had felt that unique bond. "This isn't a test of logic," she said finally. "It's a test of whether we've lost our humanity. The correct answer isn't to choose 5 over 1. The correct answer is to refuse a system that forces the choice." She worked the problem differently. She found a solution that saved both her child and the 5 strangers. It required her to risk her own simulated life. She made that choice without hesitation. When Dr. Vinthar protested that she could have died, Bo-Ra gave him a look that had withered countless difficult students. "Young man," she said, "if I have to let people die so I can live safely, then what kind of life is that?" Dr. Vinthar had no response. In his species, self-preservation was the highest logical imperative. Bo-Ra had just called it cowardice. Hyunwoo's trial was the most subtle. He was placed in a scenario where he could achieve victory by remaining invisible, by letting others take risks, while he survived safely. It tested whether humans would sacrifice themselves for others when personal survival was available. For a man who had spent decades being invisible, being overlooked, being considered ordinary, this should have been easy. This was what he had done his whole life. Instead, Hyunwoo immediately volunteered for the most dangerous task. When asked why, his answer was simple. "My daughter is watching these trials. What kind of father would I be if I taught her to hide when people need help?" He succeeded in the mission, but took severe simulated injuries doing it. The council medics noted he could have avoided 90% of the damage with a more cautious approach. "Maybe," Hyunwoo said from the medical simulation. "But then I'd have to live with myself after. That's not living." The council held an emergency session. The humans had passed every trial, but not in any way that made sense according to council logic. They chose emotion over efficiency, yet they succeeded. They refused the logical options, yet they found solutions. Veshtara was furious. "They're irrational. They choose emotion over logic, sentiment over survival. This proves they're unfit for council membership." Aspier, Sentiment was that of no, but other voices spoke up. Krell, the Drexian warrior, was allowed to address the council. "I have fought beside and against these humans," he said. "I was raised to believe that emotion was weakness, that logical ruthlessness was strength. But I have learned something from watching them." "What?" Veshtara demanded. "That we confuse efficiency with virtue," Krell said slowly. "We call our terrible choices logical, as if mathematics absolves us of moral responsibility. The humans refuse this. They insist that civilization requires us to care, even when it's inefficient." Young Overseer Keth stood. "I have been reviewing our history. In 400 years since we removed emotion from our decision-making, no Quillen has ever sacrificed themselves to save another species member. We call this logical. The humans did it twice in 7 days. Perhaps we are the ones who are lacking." Dr. Vinthar presented his findings, but his voice was uncertain. "In every scenario, the humans chose what we would call inefficient emotional responses. Yet they all succeeded. More disturbingly, their solutions were often superior to our logical baselines because they refused to accept necessary sacrifice." Ambassador Hei-Wan was summoned before the council. She stood in the center of the chamber, facing species who had judged humanity as weak. "You call emotion weakness," she said firmly. "We call it strength. You engineered it out of your species and called it evolution. Then you built this massive council structure to force yourselves to cooperate, because you genetically removed your ability to care naturally. You tested us to find weakness. You wanted to see if we would abandon our values, if we would make your terrible choices and call them logical. Here's what you learned. We won't. We will never sacrifice our children for efficiency. We will never leave our disabled behind for resources. We will never choose cold logic that lets us sleep at night after doing monstrous things. You wanted to find our weakness?" Hei-Wan continued. "Here it is. We care. We care when it's inefficient, when it's illogical, when it hurts us, and we have built a civilization that spans our solar system and reached yours without ever abandoning that so-called weakness." The council chamber was absolutely silent. For the first time, they were forced to question not whether humanity was worthy, but whether they themselves had lost something essential. Mach then spoke quietly. "The trials were designed to test humanity. Instead, they have tested us, and we have been found wanting." Commander Daejung sent an urgent message to Hei-Wan. "The council is meeting in secret session. They're not debating humanity's expansion rights anymore. You changed the entire conversation. Stand by." The 5 humans sat together, exhausted from the psychological trials. They had passed, but at a cost. Reliving those impossible choices, even in simulation, had taken something from each of them. "Do you think they'll understand?" Jiwoo asked quietly. "I don't know," Bo-Ra admitted. "We showed them something they've forgotten. Whether they can accept it is up to them." Outside, Krell stood with other competitors who had witnessed the trials. "We were wrong," the Drexian warrior said simply. "We thought they were weak. We were the weak ones. They have strength we eliminated from ourselves." The final judgment was coming. But for the first time, humanity wasn't the one being judged. Council Chamber Primus was the heart of galactic governance, a vast space where 17 species had made decisions for 400 years. Today, every council member was present, along with representatives from all species. Such gatherings only occurred during existential crises. The 5 humans stood in the center of the chamber. They were exhausted, marked by the trials they had endured. But they stood together, and they stood tall. High Arbiter Mach then rose to speak. His 4 arms gestured for silence. "The trials are complete. Humanity has passed every test. According to our laws, they are entitled to full expansion rights and council membership. A binge into well. A bingest into 12. A bingest into 12. A bingest into 12. A bingest into 12. The humans began to feel relief. They had done it. They had proven humanity's worth. Then Mach then continued. However, this council faces a crisis. You have forced us to confront uncomfortable questions about what we have become. Therefore, we offer humanity two choices. Ambassador Hei-1 felt her stomach sink. This wasn't over. Choice 1. Mach then announced. We grant you expansion rights and council membership. But you must conform to council standards. You must implement population efficiency protocols. You must establish resource management based on capability assessment. You must remove emotion from policy decisions. In short, you must become like us. End quote. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. You will have the galaxy, but you will lose what makes you human. Veshtara's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. This was the trap. Humanity would either refuse and remain limited, or accept and prove they were no different from any other species when survival was at stake. Choice 2. Mach then continued. You refuse council membership. You remain independent, limited to your current territorial boundaries, but you retain your identity, your culture, your values, your weaknesses. You will keep your humanity, but you will be alone. The chamber waited. Every eye was on the 5 humans and their ambassadors. Commander Daejung and Ambassador Hai-1 moved to confer with the team. This decision would affect billions of humans across dozens of worlds. It would shape humanity's future for generations. Young-Soo spoke first, his voice quiet but firm. We didn't come here to become them. If we have to engineer out compassion to be worthy, then we're not worthy of anything. Ji-woo nodded. If the price of the stars is who we are, it's too high. I'd rather stay small and human than become big and empty. Taemin looked at his prosthetic legs, thinking about all the times people had told him he was limited, that he was less than whole. We proved we're strong enough as we are. We don't need to change to measure up to them. They need to question their own measurements. Bo-Ra smiled gently. Sometimes the bravest thing is to walk away from something that would destroy you. I taught that to students for 40 years. It's still true. Hyun-woo thought about his daughter watching from Earth. Not a humanity that sacrificed its soul for territory. Ambassador Hei-1 stood to deliver humanity's answer. Before she could speak, Overseer Keth broke protocol. The young Quillen stood abruptly. Wait! Keth's voice echoed through the chamber. This choice is a lie! Shocked silence. Council members didn't interrupt during formal verdicts. Keth continued, his voice shaking but determined. We are forcing them to choose between expansion and identity because we are afraid. We are afraid that if they join us as they are, they will show us what we have lost. He turned to face the full council. I propose a third option. Humanity joins the council unchanged, and we adapt to them instead of forcing them to adapt to us. The chamber erupted. Species argued in a dozen languages. This violated every precedent, every tradition. The council had always required conformity. Krell, the Drexian warrior, stood. I support this motion. My people have something to learn from humans. We thought breeding perfect warriors made us strong. We were wrong. Strength is caring for those who cannot fight. Dr. Vinthar rose next. The Breviks support this as well. We removed emotion and called it evolution. Then we built a council to force ourselves to cooperate because we destroyed our ability to care naturally. Perhaps it is time to admit our mistake. Species after species stood in support. Not all of them, but enough. A majority was forming around Overseer Keth's proposal. Veshtara stood in fury. If we do this, if we allow humans to remain human while joining us, it will change everything. Our efficiency protocols, our resource management, our entire structure will be challenged by their presence. Yes, Mock then said quietly. And perhaps that is exactly what we need. The vote was called. It was closer than anyone expected. But the result was clear. Humanity would be granted full membership and expansion rights, without conditions. They could remain precisely as they were. But Mock then had more to say. The trials were designed to test humanity. Instead, they tested us. Humanity challenged what we believed about strength and weakness. And we discovered that we are the ones who must change. He gestured to the assembled council. We hereby establish the Rediscovery Initiative. We will re-examine our efficiency protocols, our cultural conditioning, our genetic modifications. We will study whether what we engineered out of ourselves was truly weakness, or whether it was the foundation of civilization. Humanity will guide this initiative. Because you have proven something we forgot. The mark of an advanced civilization is not perfection. It is compassion. The council chamber fell silent. Then, slowly, beings from 17 species began to stand. Not in opposition, but in acknowledgement. They had spent 400 years building a society based on logic and efficiency. Humanity had shown them what that society had cost. 6 months passed. The changes were slow, but real. The galaxy was not transformed overnight. But something fundamental had shifted. Young Su worked as a council liaison now, his anxiety still present but no longer a barrier. He helped 3 species develop new protocols that treated emotional response not as a bug but as a feature. His anxious mind, which saw problems everywhere, was perfect for identifying where cold logic led to cruel outcomes. Jiwoo had returned to Mars, to her family and her agricultural domes. But she gave regular addresses to council youth programs across dozens of worlds. She had become a symbol of something important. You didn't have to be physically perfect to be strong. You didn't have to be enhanced to matter. Taemin had been offered a position training council security forces. Not in combat techniques, but in philosophy. Fighting for others instead of for glory. He called it. The concept was spreading. Drexian warriors were beginning to understand that protecting the weak wasn't weakness. It was the highest form of strength. Bo-Ra had retired again, permanently this time. But she consulted on council educational initiatives, helping species relearn how to teach compassion alongside logic. Her arthritis was worse now. Her movements slower. But her mind was sharp, and her gentle wisdom was changing how the galaxy thought about value and worth. Hyun-Woo had returned to his job in waste management on Luna Station. When offered prestigious council positions, he had declined. Somebody's got to do the real work, he said. But his daughter wore his council medal now, given to him for demonstrating the value of ordinary courage. She had never been prouder of her ordinary father. On Council Station, the Quillen were questioning their population control protocols. The Drexians were experimenting with training that emphasized teamwork over individual glory. The Breviks were reintroducing emotional education in their schools. Not everyone was happy. Veshtara had resigned in protest, calling the changes dangerous sentimentality that would destroy council efficiency. Others agreed with her. Change was never easy or universal, but something was shifting across the galaxy. Slowly, carefully, the council species were beginning to remember what they had engineered away. Ambassador Haewon and Commander Daejung stood in an observation deck, watching Earth rise in the viewport. The blue marble hung in the darkness, home to 8 billion humans who would never know how close they had come to having to change who they were. We were sent to prove humanity wasn't weak, Haewon said quietly. And instead, we proved the council was, Daejung replied. Do you think it will work? Can they really change after so long? Daejung considered the question. We did the impossible. We survived trials designed to break us. We won contests we shouldn't have won. We changed minds that were certain they were right. And we did it without becoming them. We did it because we're human, he continued. Maybe that's the real lesson. Being human isn't a weakness to overcome. It's a strength to embrace. Behind them, High Arbiter Mach then approached. His 4 arms moved in the Brevik's gesture of respect. Ambassador. Commander. I have a question from several new council members. They want to understand human military culture. They are asking about something called leaving no one behind. They don't understand why soldiers would risk their lives for those who can no longer fight. Locks. By. Locks. 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 HFY turned to face him, a smile on her face. Tell them it's because we can. Tell them that's what humanity means. She looked out at Earth, at the stars beyond, at the galaxy that was now open to her species. Tell them there is no weakest among us. Only humans who need help, and humans who give it. Tell them that civilization isn't about engineering perfect beings. It's about imperfect beings who refuse to abandon each other. Mach then nodded slowly. His species had spent centuries trying to create perfect beings through genetic modification. They had succeeded in creating beings who were physically and mentally optimal, but they had lost something essential in the process. We spent so long trying to engineer perfect beings, he said quietly. We forgot that perfection isn't the absence of weakness. It's the refusal to abandon those who have them. He paused, looking at the small blue planet in the viewport. Your species is not perfect. You are emotional, inefficient, and often illogical. You protect those who cannot contribute. You sacrifice for those who cannot repay you. By every measure we developed, you should be inferior. Yet you survived our trials. You matched our champions. You forced us to question 400 years of certainty. And you did it by being precisely what you are, without apology or change. HFY smiled. We challenged your weakest assumptions, and you discovered that your assumptions were the weakness. As Mach then left, Daejong and HFY stood together, looking at the stars. Humanity had earned its place in the galaxy not through strength or perfection, but through the simple revolutionary act of remaining human. The trials had been designed to expose humanity's weakness. Instead, they had revealed humanity's greatest strength. Not the ability to be perfect, but the refusal to let imperfection be an excuse to abandon compassion. Somewhere on Earth, in 5 different locations, 5 ordinary humans went about their lives. An anxious analyst, a young girl with asthma, a man with prosthetic legs, an elderly grandmother, and a waste management worker. They had changed the galaxy, proven that humanity deserved the stars. They had done it not by becoming something they weren't, but by being exactly what they were: human, flawed, emotional, compassionate, stubborn, and utterly unwilling to leave anyone behind. And in that refusal, in that simple insistence that every person mattered, they had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten. That civilization's strength isn't measured by the capability of its strongest members. It's measured by how it treats those who need help. The Council had challenged humanity's weakest, and they had discovered that Earth had no such category. Only humans. And that was enough.